Tonight, a civilian watchdog recommends charging an RCMP officer after a death in custody.
Please get vaccinated. Vaccines are our best defense against COVID-19.
Just when you think it's safe to come out, a sixth COVID wave bears its ugly head.
A life without insulin would be freedom.
And 3 sisters set up camp to raise money for diabetes research. Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. A Lake Babine Nation man died in police custody in 2020 at the RCMP detachment in Prince George. APTN Investigates did an extensive look at similar deaths in Prince George. Now, a BC civilian oversight body has recommended charges against an officer in one of the deaths. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
According to a press release from the Independent Investigations Office of BC, the civilian oversight body, early morning on April 12, 2020, an alarm was triggered in a business in Prince George. Everett Patrick, a 42-year-old Lake Babine member, was arrested after a multiple-hour standoff with police. Patrick was then taken to the hospital, where he was medically cleared, then transported to the Prince George RCMP detachment cells. Hours later, he was found suffering serious injury and in medical distress. He was transported back to the hospital. Everett Patrick died just over a week later, his family searching for answers to what happened and calling for justice. In January of 2021, APTN Investigates did a story which looked into multiple deaths in custody of Indigenous men in Prince George. Late last month, IIOBC, the police oversight body, released a statement on the case. It states that after completing their investigation, they determined that reasonable grounds exist to believe that an officer may have committed offenses in relation to the standard of care Mr. Patrick received. As a result, pursuant of the Police Act, the IIO has forwarded a report to BC Prosecution Service for consideration of charges. The recommendation now sits with the Crown to decide whether to move ahead. We will have more in this developing story. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
A rally was held in Winnipeg this afternoon to honor the life of 16-year-old Aisha Hudson. A day marked the 2-year anniversary that Hudson was killed after she was shot by police. In April 2020, Hudson was one of 5 teens who police say were involved in a liquor store robbery before a police chase took place. As police tried to stop the car the teens were in, one of the officers fired 2 shots. An autopsy later determined Hudson died after a bullet hit her chest. An independent investigation unit in Manitoba cleared the officer of wrongdoing in Hudson's death.
You know, it's a really good feeling. You know, I'm glad that, you know, we're doing this. You know, I know it's a lot of mixed emotions for our family, but you know, it's very important, you know, to come together and, you know, to keep on gathering the way we are. You know, put the events on. You know, because, you know, it is very important, you know, for accountability, you know, for change with the systems, and, you know, so our daughter's name doesn't die in vain. And, you know, that's the most important thing. Our family has been pushing hard for a public inquiry, which is our main goal.
Thursday's federal budget didn't have as much spending directed at Indigenous people as last year's did. It promises nearly $11 billion in new spending on Indigenous priorities. That's down from $18 billion in last year's budget. For a reaction on how the money will be spent and on what, here's Fraser Needham.
Heading into this year's budget, the Assembly of First Nations was asking for $44 billion over 10 years to address the serious gap in on-reserve housing. What the Trudeau government is actually investing is $2.4 billion over 5 years. AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald says she is not happy about the massive discrepancy between the two figures, and says it is high time the government entered into a serious discussion with First Nations on economic reconciliation.
I really feel that we need to change our financial relationship with Canada. All of the wealth from Canada is being made on First Nation lands, whether those are unceded territories or treaty lands. The wealth of this country has to be shared with First Nations.
Métis priorities were also given a more prominent role in last year's budget and had their own section. This year, Métis people are only mentioned once, when the government pledged $190 million over 7 years to address housing in Métis communities. Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron says this is clearly not enough, but it is a start.
Any little bit is helpful. That 190 million over 7 years for housing in Métis communities is on top of, like I've already said, the 500 million over 10 years investment that has been negotiated through the permanent bilateral mechanism. So we do already have some funding allocations, some funding investments from the federal government. This is another top up. But I will always continue to advocate for more funding for housing for our communities.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller acknowledges 2022 is a smaller budget when compared to last year, which included record spending to address the COVID-19 pandemic. But Miller says investment in Indigenous initiatives are still significant, and the crisis in First Nations housing cannot be addressed in one budget.
Is it enough to close the housing gap? It is not. When you look at the through a lens of reconciliation, one budget doesn't encapsulate the need to put in sustained investments year over year in closing those socioeconomic gaps.
As for the Native Women's Association of Canada, in a released statement, they say they're pleased with the investments in social services, housing, education, and healthcare. However, they say they're disappointed that no additional funds have been set aside to address the violence and genocide against women mentioned in the final report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Thanks, Fraser. We need to take a break, but when we come back, 3 sisters with type 1 diabetes fight for a cure.
Responsibilities that are associated with being a diabetic is a very strong responsibility.
On Monday, Nunavut will be the last Canadian region to eliminate most COVID-19 restrictions. Our Kent Driscoll has a roundup of COVID from across the country and a pandemic that just won't go away.
Nunavut will be ending their public health emergency for COVID-19 on Monday. Masks are no longer required except at government offices, health facilities, and schools. British Columbia is lifting their COVID passport restrictions today. They're the last regions in the country to do so, following a month where the country decided to open up. Saskatchewan was the first to make the move. Their regulations came to an end on the last day of February. A day later, on March 1st, Alberta removed all restrictions. March 12th had Quebec dropping their vaccine passport rules, but they still have some masking regulations. Manitoba ditched the rules on March 15th, one day after New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador did the same. PEI followed suit on the 17th, the Yukon on the 18th. March 21st saw Nova Scotia drop the remaining rules. The same day, Ontario dropped mask requirements. The Northwest Territories made the move to stop regulating COVID on April 1st. Today was British Columbia's turn, and Monday, Nunavut joins the rest of the country in removing restrictions. According to Nunavut's health minister, the move is based on learning through 2 years of pandemic response.
Looking at the past 2+ years of the COVID pandemic, we've learned a lot about the virus. We know how it spreads, how it affects people's health, and how to keep each other safe. We need to remember these lessons so that we continue to protect each other from COVID-19.
One of the reasons all the regions gave for dropping the regulations is the vaccination rate. Here in Nunavut, 92% of all adults have received 2 doses of a COVID vaccine, beating the Canadian rate of 82%. The Indigenous national vaccination rate for COVID-19 is 89%. Nunavut's chief public health officer warns that the pandemic isn't over, just the restrictions.
COVID-19 is not gone and is likely here to stay. While there are no restrictions in place, I encourage Nunavummiut to manage the risk of COVID-19 responsibly. If you are sick, stay home and do not go to public places or gatherings. If you must have contact with others, please wear a mask. Please get vaccinated. Vaccines are our best defense against COVID-19 and will continue to be available in all communities.
The country may be opening up, but there is some evidence of a 6th wave of COVID-19 hitting Canada. One thing is certain, we are all going to see what removing those restrictions does, and it starts in Nunavut on Monday. Then we'll find out if following the lead of the rest of Canada was the right move or not. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
3 Mi'kmaq sisters have all been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. As part of the campaign to raise funds, they've been camped out in a teepee for 3 days for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, hoping that they find them a cure. Angel Moore takes us there.
For 3 nights on the Millbrook First Nation, this teepee has been home for 3 sisters. Known as T1D, Type 1 Diabetes Sisters, they are raising funds to find a cure. Braylon Brooks is 14 years old.
A life without insulin would be freedom.
The sisters sometimes have to inject insulin up to 5 times a day. Time lost with friends is the biggest concern for 11-year-old Vienna Brooks.
It is kind of tiring for me, only because when I want to go play or something, I'm usually like high or low or something, and I have to like treat it.
Siobhan Brooks keeps an eye on her daughters, who were all diagnosed in 2019.
It's really tough. My kids are really strong, and they just they make it look easy, and they just can continue to live their life to the fullest. And I'm in awe of that. They push me to just keep going.
Elder Patsy Paul Martin stopped by the teepee to offer support and a prayer in Mi'kmaq. She has type 2 diabetes.
The responsibilities that are associated with being a diabetic is a very strong responsibility.
A big responsibility for 9-year-old Callie.
It's easier than when I first got diagnosed, because when I was first diagnosed, I didn't get to inject myself or anything. But now I know more and I can do more.
Siobhan wants her daughters to live a full life.
It's hard, it's tough, but it's doable. But this is one reason, like, we want to find a cure, right? So that they don't have to prick their fingers all day, every day, or inject insulin.
The T1D sisters have raised over $2,000. Until the end of May, all donations will be matched by the Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Millbrook First Nation.
The 60 Scoop class action settlement now includes more than 20,000 claimants. That means they will receive $25,000 each due to the high number who have to share much of the money. Colleen Hella Cardinal was scooped alongside her two sisters from an Alberta First Nation. She is the co-founder of the 60 Scoop network and spoke to Daryl Stranger earlier.
Hi, Colleen. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Can you help us understand what this latest information means for 60 Scoop survivors?
Well, basically, we got a $21,000 interim payment just after the COVID pandemic hit us in 2020. And this is now the final payment that they are going to be issuing. And then the settlement is done.
So what were survivors, I guess, expecting from this?
I think we were hoping to get a little bit more than $4,000. I think we thought maybe with the amount of interest that it's been sitting wherever it's being kept, that, you know, with that time, but also that we'd have a little bit more money given to us.
So what does the money mean to survivors as a whole, Colleen?
It's really, I think it's been a rough couple of days for us. Not only is it the reminder of what we've lost collectively, it's another part of our grief of loss of cultural identity, but it's also a trigger for everything that we've been through, summed up in a small little payout.
Now, should there be an official apology, which isn't a part of the settlement, and if so, how would that help?
For my healing, I not only need an apology, I need them to ask us for forgiveness for what they've done to our families, to our communities, and to our nations. It just wasn't just us that was impacted. It was communities and families, systems that were devastated. So we need something to acknowledge what they've done to us, whether it's an apology or to come to us and ask us for our forgiveness on our land.
All right, Colleen. Well, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes today to speak on this subject.
Thank you.
APTN's Angel Moore went out harvesting eels with a Mi'kmaq man this week, and she brings us this preview.
These are baby eels, also called glass eels or elvers. They can sell for up to $5,000 a kilogram. What Fabian Francis of Eskazoni First Nation wants to earn a moderate livelihood. He says it's his treaty right, but technically what he's doing is illegal. See what happens when Department of Fisheries and Oceans officers show up. I'll have the rest of this story next week.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. APTN's social media editor Jesse Andrushko shared this shot of his brother-in-law preparing a delicious roast chicken feast just to get us all hungry, I guess, for dinner. We love your nature, your food, your pets, your cute kids. Send anything like that to us at share@aptn.ca for a chance to be our next photo of the day. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather. Starting off on the East Coast, we got 13 and sunny skies for Charlottetown, rain, and 17 for Halifax. La Grande River, snow and 2 degrees. In Inukjuak, you're getting some flurries, -3. Saguenay, you're the only sunny spot down there, 8 degrees, 10 and cloud for Gaspé. London, 4 with a chance of flurries. A chance of flurries for you in North Bay and 5 degrees. 0 and flurries for Kapuskasing and Timmins, sunshine and 7 for Thunder Bay. Norway House, 7 and showers expected there. Puckatawagan, you might get some snow, 4 degrees. Sunshine in Brandon, 9 degrees. 8 and showers for Dauphin. 8 and showers for Regina and Yorkton. 10 and sunny for North Battleford. 5 and snow for Buffalo Narrows. 2 and snow for Stony Rapids and Uranium City. Snow in northern Alberta. There you've got 8 in High Level. 5 and Fort McMurray. Sunshine for Edmonton, 6 degrees. 9 and showers for Lethbridge. Kamloops, you're getting showers, 7 degrees. Same with Campbell River, 7 and sunshine for Quesnel. 8 in Prince Rupert, 6 and sunny skies. -6 for Beaver Creek with some snow. Rock River, snow, -12. Wrigley, snow, -2. Wati, sunny skies at -5. Inuvik, snow and 2. Sax Harbor, clear skies, -12. Chesterfield, -7 and some flurries there. New Yacht, -6 and flurries. Arctic Bay, sunny, -15. Clyde River, -13 and snow. Pangertung, snow, -7. As COVID restrictions continue to be lifted across Canada, musicians are eager to hit the stage and play for live audiences. As Sarah Connors tells us, a pair of musical artists in Toronto are hopeful to get the ball going, very eager when it comes to post-pandemic live performances.
After 2 years where virtual shows were the norm, Ojibwe Cree musician Aisha is happy to be in his element, live shows.
I think a lot of us for 2 years were just stuck in our apartment, stuck in isolation, and so to be able to do this and be with each other again and share these stories is just something special.
Thursday's performance in Toronto was part of his Goshko series, which is Ojibwe for Surprise. The series features up-and-coming Indigenous musicians, Juno Award-winning artists, and even underground sounds. Tonight's guest, folk and blues musician Lacey Hill from Six Nations.
Yes, it's absolutely a blessing to be able to play some music and to share, really, and to see people in public, like in person.
With a crowd full of energy, the performers say it's a feeling virtual shows just can't beat.
There wasn't people saying thank you, clapping, and doing the buffalo call, and there wasn't that give and take, which I think you can only experience when you're in the room.
It's an absolute honor to even be out in public and to share some of the things that we've been going through.
Aisha says with restrictions lifting, it's now more important than ever to support Indigenous artists.
We're coming out of a time where no one was able to generate any income from their art, but they're still doing it, and they still just rolled with the punches. But now we're back out here, we're doing it again. So.
I know what you, babe. Arms raised high to the sun in the sky, counting all the goddamn reasons why I'm loving you.
Tonight on APTN Investigates, John Murray goes beyond the headlines to the worst case scenario for Indigenous harvesters. He interviewed family and friends of Jacob Sansom and Morris Cardinal, 2 Cree Métis men who were shot dead while hunting 2 years ago. Now the pair accused of killing them are coming up for a second-degree murder trial. John Murray joins us now. John, refresh our memory about this tragic case.
Well, 2 years ago, on March 27th, 2020, Jacob Sansom and Morris Cardinal were out hunting, and they got confronted on a road after they were finished hunting that day, and all we know is they were confronted and they ended up being shot dead. We're still waiting to know more details about that.
Yeah. You know, the case has become a flashpoint for Indigenous harvesting rights, but you went way above the headlines. What were you able to find out about these two men? Who were they?
Well, you know, I found out that they were traditional Cree Métis harvesters. And Jacob himself was even beyond just being a traditional hunter. He was actually destined to be a pipe holder. And his uncle Morris was also raised traditionally on the land up in the area in Wolf Lake, Alberta, and that is where he also learned to live on the land. So both of these men live very traditional lifestyles, as well as modern lifestyles, of course, and they carried knowledge, both traditional and spiritual.
This case was the worst case scenario, really, in an ongoing tension that we see across the country, oftentimes between Indigenous harvesters and property owners, or Indigenous harvesters and non-Indigenous harvesters. How has this case affected those already kind of boiling tensions?
Well, you know, there is a lot of tension out in the region, and it is an area where a lot of people are traditional harvesters. I even spoke with one man who said that he had to leave the area because he was so uncomfortable being in the area, and you know, and he is a traditional harvester, and you know, he felt uncomfortable being on the land because of some of the confrontations that were happening out there. And then of course the social media comments, they've also been filled with speculation about what these men were doing out there, and of course some of the speculation is about illegal harvesting.
Well, we look forward to that. This is right on after the national newscast here, that deep dive into that really tragic incident. Thank you so much for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
None of the allegations against the men have been proven in court. You can watch Sharing the Land on APTN Investigates coming up next. We are all out of time for your APTN National News. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Stay tuned right away for Sharing the Land.